Hey, what's going on there, guys? First of all, thanks for picking up this copy of photomotion. We hope you enjoy your photo animation journey with us. So within this video, we're just going to be showing you a quick tutorial from getting this still image into this 3D animation. Okay, so the first step is to extract this photomotion X zip. Doesn't matter where, as it should work anywhere within your computer. So we'll just double click on this folder just over here. Now, of course, photomotion parallax lite only comes with photomotion parallax, although all of the other ones are still available within the full version. So with that said, just jump into the parallax folder. Okay, so the next step is just to access parallax. Just make sure to give After Effects a little bit of time. We're loading a lot of files into the cache, so just bear with for a moment. Cool, so you'll instantly notice at the splash screen here that everything outside of the viewport is pretty blank. Photomotion is of course a viewport based application, so most of our work is done within the viewport and effect controls. Not to say that you can't do more, we still have the full power of After Effects within this application. Right, so with that quick disclaimer out the way, let's just go to the viewport here and just double click on this Start Parallax, which will bring you into the main dashboard. As you can see, we have a lot of things completely blanked out. That's mostly due to the fact that we haven't added in our picture yet, so don't fear, this is all part of the workflow. We also have all of these aspect ratios just over here, just on the right hand corner. Just click on one and then go to effect controls in order to activate it. Although in saying that, some of these aspect ratios are locked off within the photomotion parallax lite version. Let's continue on setting up our animation. Let's just get to adding our photo by just double clicking on this add background button and then getting access to this background composition. Once we're in here, just import your photo into the project, and you can do that by just going to File and then Import File just over here, or just hold Control and then hit I on your keyboard. Cool, so just find your file and then click Import. After we've done so, it'll of course appear within this projects tab, so just drag it down here into this Add Background Composition, and then what we'll be doing is just parenting it to this parent layer just above by clicking and dragging the swirl icon and then holding Shift. We'll be scaling it using the parent layer just above until it fits the viewport. By doing things this way, what we'll be doing is essentially applying all of these attributes universally throughout our project. This will make sense in a bit, so just bear with us if you're a tad confused. So after we're done here, let's just close this composition and then jump back to the main dashboard. So next stage, we'll be jumping into this layer and then importing our photo in again because we want our main subject. Just drag in the picture that we've used for the add background composition into this composition, and then make sure to parent it to the parent layer above whilst holding Shift. This time you'll notice that the picture is automatically scaled, and that's because we've already done the legwork in the composition beforehand, and that parent layer will copy said attributes across anything that we parent it to. Okay, so with that done, if we check out our final animation for a second, we can see that we have her and this cliff edge separated from the image in order to create this parallax effect. So what we'll need to do is just mask her and the edges out, and we can do that two ways, one of which is to use the pen tool, and this is perfectly acceptable in most cases, but because of this grass here, that might be horrifically painful, as we'll have to spend a lot of time masking the grass out. So let's just use the rotor brush instead, as that will save us a massive amount of time. So select the rotor brush just up here and then double click on the viewport and start creating this selection around her by painting these lines in. What that will essentially do is just hunt down areas of contrast and create our selection around it. So we now have the selection around her and this rock here. Let's just jump ahead a second though, as we have this problem just over here where we have an area that we don't want within our selection. This is an easy fix, so rest assured, just hold Alt on your keyboard and then paint over the areas. That'll create this just red line over here, and that will remove this selection. So if you're not familiar with the rotor brush, it will only mask this selection for a couple of seconds, and we need that mask permanently fixed throughout our animation. This is an easy fix. We're just going to convert this into a permanent mask by just going over to Layer, then clicking on this Auto Trace just over here. What that will essentially do is just convert all of this into a mask. Let's just remove the rotor brush effect in effect controls, no longer need it, and then we're going to go to select this JPEG layer just over here and then hit M to bring up all of these masks. What we want to do is just change it from none to add, which means that this mask will be adding in the masked parts of our image. And that's our first layer set up. Next next step is just to jump into the main dashboard, and before clicking anything else, we're going to want to swap out the rotor brush for the selection tool. Don't want to be rotor brushing out our buttons after all. Okay, so this is our main controller. We can move this a number of different ways, and that in turn will move our layers within photomotion, with our closest layers seeing the most amount of movement. There is more to this controller, but we'll get to explaining that in a second. First, let's just showcase the problem. We'll move our controller slightly, and as we do so, we're seeing doubles here, and that's due to the fact that we haven't made our clean plate yet. A clean plate is a background image layer that has all of our data of what is behind the other layers. We can't just mask her out and then call it a day, unfortunately, as if we do so, we'll run into some negative space. What we have to do essentially is just rebuild parts of the image of what our layers used to inhabit, essentially providing our own representation of what we expect to be behind our main subject here when that photo was taken. Okay, so with that rambling over, let's just show you how to create a clean plate. This may seem daunting, but follow along, bear with us. It's actually quite simple. We're going to jump back into our add background layer, as that's the layer we want to generate that data in. So just double click on the button down here. What we're going to do first is just select the layer and go up here and then select the clone stamp. Double click on the screen here. Before doing anything else, it is essential that our playhead is at the very beginning, and we can double check this by just going over to here and checking that these numbers are set to 0. And then we're going to select an area that we want to use as a sample by just holding Alt. Very quickly, the way clone stamp works is just by copying areas of your image. Think of it as transplanting these areas where we're selecting our sample and then applying them to areas that we want removed. Let's just jump a little bit ahead, and we can see that by using the clone stamp tool, our clean plate has really came together rather quite nicely. We also got rid of that road here as well, and sometimes it's just easier to rework the image ever so slightly in contrast to making it work. Okay, so back to our main dashboard. If we drag our controller from one edge to another, we can see that we're no longer seeing any duplicates or distortions. So before creating our animations, let's just get to importing in our other layers. First, we'll just double click on this layer 2, and then we'll go to File and then Import File, or again, just hit Control and I to import these two bird layers in that we've made within Photoshop. We'll then bring this bird's 1 PNG into the composition and then parent it to this parent layer while holding Shift. We can also scale and move these layers separately and independently in case we want to do some last minute adjustments. So let's do that now by first just moving these birds on the viewport. We can also do this by just using the base layer positioning attributes and then making sure that we are selecting the base layer here, not the parented layer. Hit S on your keyboard to bring up all of these scaling attributes. Cool, so let's do the same here with the other birds by just going back to the main dashboard and then jumping into this layer 3 here. Again, just parent it to the layer above whilst holding Shift and then scale and position them from the base PNG layer in order to tweak it independently. And there we go, our layers are now set up and we're home free to getting the most creative part of our workflow, animating our image. So we can essentially move our controller in any direction now. Just make sure not to take it to too much of an extreme and reveal any negative space around the sides. If we click on this magnifying glass over here on our main controller and then go to Effect Controls, we can see this zoom slider, and if we bring that in, you can see that our camera zooms into this animation, which is pretty cool. This button over here to our right, that contains our rotational slider, which will rotate our animation. We can use the icon to the left to rotate it to the opposite direction, so we have a lot of creative freedom in terms of direction. So what we're going to do is just add this basic zoom animation here. So again, select the magnifying glass, bring us in using the slider here, and then we'll just adjust our framing using the main controller. We'll then bring our playhead to the desired animation time. For us, it's the 8 seconds point into our timeline. Okay, so with all of that done, let's just zoom out of our animation and then move this controller back to how we found it. Now, because we've moved our playhead to the 8 seconds mark, we'll now see an animation from 0, where we zoomed in, back to here where we've zoomed out 8 seconds later. Right, so let's also add some rotation into our animation by going back to the beginning and then clicking on this icon to the right of our controller and then using the rotation slider in Effect Controls. Because we haven't told Photomotion that we want this to revert back to normal, when we go to our 8 seconds point, we'll still see that our rotation is in place and isn't animating. So let's just dial it down when we've got our playhead at the 8 seconds point, and that will animate it out. Okay, so let's just bring back our working area. You can also put your time head at the right place and hit N on the keyboard, and we can also see our animation represented by the keyframes with a couple at the beginning and a couple at the end. Let's also change our keyframes to easing by just selecting them all and then just hitting F9 on the keyboard, just to smooth out our animation so it ramps up in the middle and then slows down for the end. If we preview what we have, we can see that our animation starts zoomed in and then reveals our main subjects, thus reverting us back to how the image was originally formed. around. Okay, so let's just get to enabling our particles, and we can do that by just clicking on the settings button just over here and then checking this activate particles checkbox within effect controls. Great, so that will enable the particles that you can play around with. If we cycle through the particle type, we can see all the ones that are available within Parallax Lite. Now, while there's a good selection here, we have so many more within the full version, but this at least gives you a sample of what you can use, and they're actually pretty cool. All of these will interact in a similar fashion to how your layers work and are fully immersed within your 3D scene. Let's just demonstrate this. First, we'll pick these particles and then we'll go over to their curves within effect controls and we'll dial down their alpha channel highlights in order to bring down their transparency. That way they pop less, and if we preview, you can see that they're actually physically there within that 3D scene and move just as the camera does. Very cool. So we're quite happy with this. Let's just double click on this export here and then choose our export aspect ratio. As said before, within the trial version, you have 3 to choose from. We'll use the default for now, and then we'll be within this export composition. You'll notice that we have a number here just on the main viewport, and that's the photomotion perfect cut system. What that does is tell us the exact frame that we want to be on in order to render out the animation precisely. Otherwise, we could accidentally cut our animation short or have tons and tons of time where nothing is actually happening. So let's just go to our measurement units over here, and in case you're still seeing time, just make sure to control click on it in order to swap it over to frame count, and then just type out the 240 here in order to bring our playhead to the 240 frame point. Now after you've done so, just hit N on your keyboard to mark out, which will finally tell After Effects this is our working area and we just want to render out this section. Okay, so let's just look at some of the post effects that we can add by just double clicking on our effects button over here, and then we have this huge library of effects that you can choose from color corrections to logo reveals. Let's look at adding some light leaks into this animation. If we preview all of these light leaks, you can see that each one has their own independent look and color. Again, we have so many more within the full version, but this is at least enough to play around with and create some cool funky effects. So let's just select the one up here in the main viewport, copy it by Control C on the keyboard, and then when we get back to the main render composition, just hit Control V in order to paste it just down here. We'll then drag this light leak here below our layer in order to see all of our buttons, and then we'll drag this fade out marker here to the end of our working area. If we don't do this, our light leak will fade out in the middle of the animation, which is again not exactly ideal. If we preview this now, we can see that this light leak adds an extra bit of life to our scene. We have more stuff to play around with within this composition, so let's just go to the settings button just over here, and when we go to effect controls, we have all of these settings to play about with. So let's just add some vignetting in for now, bringing it to the point where it's nice and subtle within our animation. Cool, so once we're happy, let's just go to composition here and then click add to render queue, which will open up After Effects render engine. We'll then click on this lossless down here and change this default format from AVI to QuickTime. After, we'll just change our output destination by just clicking on this not yet specified next to output. For us, again, we'll be placing it just on the desktop. We'll then click on render to begin the rendering process. Now, an extra tidbit, if you want an MP4 for uploading to social media, say for example, you can't directly render out MP4s from After Effects at the time of recording. Kind of annoying. You can, however, load Adobe Media Encoder straight from After Effects, but that will create another project file which takes up space, which can be a bit of a pain to clean up later. You can also just import the rendered animation into Media Encoder. In either case, just make sure that you're rendering out as H.264 and you're happy with your settings. Outside of that, you're good to go. So that's all completed now. Thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoy the toolkit and find it useful. In case this tempts you to pick up the full version, we have so many in-depth classes on various projections, as well as a few small helpful tips on After Effects 2 in order to assist you on your photomotion journey. Of course, feel free to follow us on social media and share your animations with us. We'd love to see your results. Take it easy, and until next time.